What's good, y'all? It's your boy HB, final round. I'm going to talk about the keys for the fight. Jake Paul versus Tyron Woodley. We'll start off with Jake Paul. Okay, now, for me, this is very interesting in terms of what Jake Paul can do. I think there's a lot of shit he can do in this fight. I don't necessarily know how he's going to approach it. I don't know how both of these fighters are necessarily going to approach this fight. There's not enough of a background and a resume on both of them to know how they consistently go in a boxing ring and display their abilities. There's not enough shit out there. Even with Jake Paul, there's not enough. We have an idea, but it's not like he has this wide resume of variety of opponents to where he's shown his capabilities. Granted, he's just starting off, so let's be fair there. Now, for me, all I can do is give my personal opinion and assessment of what I would do, or if I was the trainer in the corner, what I would say to do. Now, we know that, and I'll make a separate video for Woodley. We know for Jake Paul, he's got a pretty decent jab, pretty stiff jab for a beginner. I don't know if I should call him a beginner, but someone who's just starting off in the game. Pretty solid, pretty stiff. That's a good weapon to have. It emulates, I'm not comparing it to Triple G's jab, you guys, but it's more on the side of a stiff jab as opposed to just a jab you flick out there, or it's more about speed and landing as opposed to power and keeping your opponent at the end of your punch. It's there. It's there if he wants to use it. Jake Paul, he'll throw that jab out there. And he likes to fully extend. There's some power behind it. He mixes it up well from the head to the body. So there should be a huge asset for him, especially being the bigger fighter. I mean, the jab should be everybody's main punch, go-to punch. Especially in boxing, that's how your whole foundation is built, is off your jab. Although not every fighter decides to utilize it in the most efficient manner. But we know Jake Paul's got a good jab. We know Jake Paul's got power, okay? Now how that power goes up against an opponent who's defensively responsible, well, we'll find out. Maybe we'll find out tonight. Maybe Tyron Woodley will give him some looks. Maybe not. Maybe he'll fall into the same trap the last three guys did. We know Jake Paul has a nasty overhead right. He loves to step back and, he loves to counter and plant that sucker in there. And he does a good job of it. It's a good overhand right. And sometimes he needs to keep his head up and keep his eyes on the target. But, when you have an opponent rushing you, like, say, Nate Robinson, you don't really need to keep your eyes up because he's just going to run into the punch, But it's always better as you get improved to keep your eyes on the target, Even if he is recklessly coming in, you want to focus. That's something you want to work on as you're developing, keeping your eyes on the target. Because that comes into handy once you start getting better and facing better opponents. You got to be able to see what's happening in front of you if you want to execute in the way you desire. So we know Jake Paul has a fairly decent jab. We also know he likes to go down to the body, at least with his jab. Very beautiful. We know he has a good overhand right. We know he has some power. And another thing, he's got a pretty damn good uppercut, which I think could be one of the key punches in this fight for him. You got the smaller man. He might come blitzing in, possibly with his head down. That right uppercut should be there. And you saw against Nate Robinson, he threw a beautiful uppercut against him and fucked him up. So Jake Paul's got some tools to utilize here. If I'm his trainer or if I'm Jake Paul, one of the things I hope he focused in this camp was improving was his left hook. I want to see his left hook, man. Like, you're not going anywhere in boxing if you well, at least you're not going anywhere high in terms of high level if you don't have a good left hook. I hate the way him and his brother throw left hooks. It's very wide, lots of fat on the punch. It's almost like they're slapping it. I want to see a good tight hook in this fight. Boom. Let's see what you got. Let's see how much you develop that, because you're going to need that as you start to progress to real boxers if you win this fight, that is. And you're going to need that just in general, even if it's against better MMA strikers. You're going to need that left hook. So I hope he's been working on that. I think that's a tool he can utilize in this fight. So one of the keys to this fight is take what Tyron gives you. Be the boxer. Mold into the situation. You watch Andre Ward, that's what makes him so fucking phenomenal, is he usually just takes what his opponent gives him. If his opponent wants to be aggressive and come towards him, Andre Ward is boxing. He's pivoting out. He's jabbing. He's feinting. He's backing up. Boxing. Okay, you want to come towards me? Come towards me. Boom, 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 countering. Boxing off the back foot. If his opponent wants to be fleet of foot, and avoid the fight, okay, Andre Ward's up in your face. He's getting in your grill. Bang, bang, bang. He's bringing the action towards you. If Andre Ward's opponent wants to clinch, okay, let's play the clinch game. Andre Ward will get up in the clinch, do some dirty boxing, make the fight ugly, wear you down in the clinch. It's whatever you give him. And obviously I'm not comparing Jake Paul to Andre Ward. I'm just saying that you, supposedly being the boxer, going up against an MMA fighter, you should be able to do some of those things against Tyron Woodley. Show him what boxing is about. You have some tools at your disposal. Take what it gives you. So if Tyron Woodley wants to back up, he doesn't want to look for the fight, bring the fight towards Tyron Woodley. Now, I'm not saying he needs to get extraordinarily aggressive in the process, right? I'm not saying just because Tyron Woodley is backing up, because obviously he's going to be setting up traps, especially with that big right hand that Tyron has. I'm not saying he should go in there recklessly. I'm not even saying he should put intelligent pressure, cutting off the ring, and backing Tyron down. Now, can he do that? Sure. He's the bigger fighter. He has a good jab. He likes to go to the body. He has some good tools at his disposal to be a pressure fighter in this fight if he chooses. But he doesn't necessarily need to do that. And I don't know necessarily if that's the way he likes to fight or not. So if I'm Jake Paul, I'm coming in. And this should be noted. Look, every fighter should feint. It's such an easy, efficient move. It doesn't expend a lot of energy. It throws your opponent's timing off. It throws his rhythm off. It gives you the ability to time him as you're throwing his rhythm off. It's such a, and you're going to hear me say it for each fighter breakdown, or the keys to the fight for each fighter. So I'm sorry if I get repetitive throughout these videos and say he needs to feint, he needs to feint. Yes, but it's important to notate. So Jake Paul, feint your way in. Feint your way half step. Don't rush in. Don't blitz Tyron Woodley. Don't get reckless with your combos. Just make them uncomfortable. Come your way in, feint. All right? Work your jab. Work your jab. You've shown you have a pretty damn good jab. It's stiff. You showed that you mix it up from head to body. All right, go down to the body. Every time you back Tyron Woodley down up to the corner, or you get his back to the ropes, feint him. Throw him off. See what Tyron Woodley's going to do. Is he going to blitz at me once I feint him because he thinks I'm going to attack? See how Tyron's going to respond with those feints and keeping that active pressure with the jab if Tyron Woodley decides, okay, I don't want to fight off the back foot. And for me, all I'd be doing is feinting. Jab. Jab. Giving them different looks. Okay, you want to back up? I'm just going to half step my way in. And I would be patiently waiting for Tyron to come at me, step back, and maybe set up that overhand. But before I would even get to that overhand, this is why I brought in the left hook. You got to mix it up. Tyron Woodley's looking for that right hand. And I think one of the counters he's going to have waiting for Jake is it's going to be an exchange of right hands for both fighters. It's just a matter of who's going to get it off first or who's going to time it properly. I saw it in training. Tyron Woodley is probably going to set this up, or he's going to be looking for it. He's probably going to look to slip to his right, slip to his right, and as he's slipping to his right, sneak his right hand on Jake Paul as Jake Paul's throwing his own right hand. Very risky for for Tyron Woodley, because if you're going to slip a right hand, to the right, you have to be aware you're lining up with his right hand, so you have to, bend over a little bit more. That's taking a page out of Mike Tyson's peekaboo style. If you're going to slip left, slip all the way left so you avoid that right hand. But I think Tyron Woodley's going to be looking for that big right hand that Jake Paul possesses. He knows that's his go-to. That's what I'm saying. This is where Jake Paul needs to have his left hook ready to go. And this can later on set up the big right hand, and you might not even need it because a good left hook can seal the deal. So Tyron Woodley wants to back up, feint him, keep active pressure, jab him. You don't necessarily need to cut off the ring, but if you want to, sure, go for it. And wait for Tyron Woodley. Be the bigger man, use your range, keep him at the end of your punches, and if Tyron Woodley decides to attack, hook him. Pivot and hook. This is very reminiscent of Mayweather versus Ricky Hatton. All right, but I'll get into that a little later in terms of Jake Paul when he needs to be more defensive and fighting off the back foot. But that's all I would do. I would wait actively for Tyron Woodley as I'm closing the distance, okay? And when Tyron Woodley wants to blitz me or attack, that's when I pivot and hook. And then, or maybe throw that overhand, or maybe change it up, throw a right uppercut. Uppercut and a hook, follow up with a hook. Pick his head up, and then follow with a hook. If Tyron Woodley wants to get aggressive and he shows he wants to put pressure in this fight, that's all right. Blocks off the back foot. L step. Pivot out. Keep on feinting him. Keeping his time off his rhythm. And when Tyron Woodley decides to launch his attack, like I said, pivot with a hook. When your back gets close to the ropes or the corner, pivot with the hook. Take what Tyron gives you and, set it up. Set up that overhand right instead of going to it first things first. Because that's what Jake Paul is going to have to show, that he's deeper. We know he can think in there. We know he's a little bit creative. But he's going to have to show that, okay, what happens when my first go-to move doesn't work? How do I improvise? How do I adapt? Because it's one thing to have one setup in your game and a big money punch. But what happens when your opponent takes that away from you, or they're able to weather the storm, right? Even if you do land it, but he survives, and you're going to round 3, 4, 5. Are you going to panic, or are you going to have more tools at your disposal? Are you going to be able to set up other things, off of that? Or are you going to be able to set that overhand right up in different ways? You have a variety of ways to set it up. So that's me. That's the key to the fight for Jake Paul. I believe he needs to be the boxer in this fight. I believe he needs to take what Tyron Woodley gives him. Utilize your jab. Keep Tyron at the end of your punches. Don't ever get reckless. Don't rush in. Feint Tyron Woodley. Get him to come out of his shell and attack you, whether it's moving forward or whether you're boxing off the back foot. Set up your overhand right first with throwing your hook. Get it in his mind every time he comes in, he has a hook waiting for you. You have a hook waiting for Tyron. And then eventually step back, land that overhand right. So that's the approach I would personally take. But, I think there's many ways Jake Paul can skin the cat. I'm very fascinated with what he might do. I've been hearing that he may come out southpaw. I don't think that's a good idea. Unless he's really been working that in fucking sparring. I don't know if that's a good idea. And why is he doing that? I don't know. Maybe he's trying to show an extra dimension to his game, or maybe he's afraid of Tyron Woodley's right hand. But you know, that's a mistake that a lot of fighters make. Oh, I'm scared of this guy's right hand, or I'm scared of his left hand from the southpaw stance, so I'm going to fight, you know, I'm going to mirror his stance. Well, you know, when you're mirroring an opponent, when you have southpaw versus orthodox, you know, you actually might be putting yourself in a more vulnerable position to line up that power hand, right? Now, you may be able to avoid it with your footwork in a little bit easier way, but it's a little bit easier to line those power shots up when you're mirroring your opponent's stance. So, Jake Paul, keep your jab active, keep Tyron behind it. If Tyron wants to back up, put a little pressure on him. Don't rush him, be patient, feint him, see what he's gonna offer you. Every time Tyron Woodley pulls out of his shell, set up your left hook, and then off that left hook, eventually throw that overhand right, land a big money punch, and then on to the next one. Now we're talking about Jake Paul. Who's Jake Paul gonna fight next? So that's the keys to the fight for Jake Paul. You know, be the boxer, take what your opponent gives you, show the different dimensions to your game. And another combo, one more thing to notate, I think the uppercut can be a money punch for him. And if he has been working on his hook, mix that up, mix that combo up, uppercut, left hook, uppercut, left hook. You know, there could be a great setup for a guy who's undersized, who may come in with his head down. I'm not saying Tyron's gonna do that, but it could be there. So Jake Paul likes to go to the body as well. All these things, he can do this a lot of different ways. He can put pressure, cut off the ring, be the bigger man, put his weight on Tyron, or you know, he can box off the back foot. He can box coming forward. But I think in order for Jake Paul to set up some of his punches going backward, he's gonna need to come a little bit forward, you know, to trigger a response from Tyron, because I think Tyron is going to be patient, and I think he's gonna try to be intelligent and calculated for the first few rounds before he gets off, unless an opportunity just shows itself. One thing Jake Paul is gonna need to watch out is for the right hand, the right cross. I think he is primed for that. It's just a matter of when an opponent is going to expose it. But that's the key to the fight for Jake Paul. Just be a boxer, man. You're supposed to be the boxer against an MMA fighter. Utilize your different tools. You know, utilize your different tools. It's that fucking simple. It's your boy HB, final round. Get at me, comment down below, like, subscribe to the video. Tell me what you think. How should Jake Paul fight? What does he need to do to win? Let's have fun this weekend.